Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Tina Jha. After the cancellation of Class 12 exams by CBSE and most state boards across the country, students are now eagerly awaiting for the admission process to begin for undergraduate programs. Following the cancellation of the board exams, concerns were raised over evaluation and admission to undergraduate colleges. Reports now suggest that the government is looking at conducting a centralised common entrance test for admission to various universities in the July-August period from this academic session onwards. The common entrance test could be like the JEE and the NEET exams for admission to non-technical programs at the undergraduate level. Marks secured in this entrance test will be considered for admission to all central universities across the country, as per reports. So if the government gives a go-ahead, the common entrance test for college admissions will be conducted by the National Testing Agency, the agency which is also tasked with conducting a number of such exams, including those for medical and engineering courses as well. So what will be the structure of the common entrance test for undergraduate courses? How and when will it be conducted? And is it the best option for college admissions in the current scenario? These are some of the aspects that we will discuss on this edition of The Big Picture with two very distinguished panelists. It is my absolute pleasure today to welcome on the program Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, Vice Chancellor of the Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is also a member of the National Testing Agency. And Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, he is Chairman of the Manipal Global Education. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on the program today. Professor Kumar, let me begin the show today with you. So although a discussion on a common entrance test for college admissions is something that is awaited, deliberations are still going on, we believe. But if you could share with us what have been the recommendations to this regard? Has the NTA been tasked to prepare for conducting a common entrance test for college admission?
First of all, the students need not feel anxious at this moment because for some time we have been discussing what formula will be used by CBSE to evaluate the 12th standard examinations, and the CBSE has now come up with a formula. We can, of course, debate for hours on whether that formula should have been this way or that way, but CBSE has come up with a formula, and even the Honorable Supreme Court has agreed to that. So whatever marks the CBSE may give or other state boards may give, and those marks are, one set of information that we have about the students' performance, which can be used for the admissions in the universities. But majority of the universities in our country, such as JNU, whether it's a general university or professional universities, they make use of entrance examination as a means of admitting these students. Now, the question now is, should we use an entrance examination for the admission of the students into higher education? Now, if you look at the admission process, which is solely based on the marks obtained in the 12th standard, there is a challenge there, because when the teachers evaluate the subjective answer scripts, when they are evaluating hundreds of them, thousands of them, there is this fatigue that sets into the teacher, and the mood of the teacher may change. For one student, you may give, for the same answer, you may give 10 marks. For another student, you may give 11 marks or 12 marks. And in the end, for the same answers, a particular student may get 92 and another student may get 89. When the admission is solely based on this kind of marking, I think that is not a very good approach for the admission of the students into higher education system. Ultimately, we need to move on to an entrance examination-based admission process. And I'm glad that as part of the national education policy, there is a greater emphasis on having a common entrance examination for all the UG programs across the country. So NTA, as you know, has already evolved over a period of several years now. They conduct the NEET exam for the medical admissions. They conduct the JEE examination for other professional college admissions. So NTA is fully geared and technically very able now to conduct an entrance test across the country for the admission into UG programs. And I very well welcome the conduct of the entrance examination for the admissions into UG programs across the country.
Okay, so Professor, if we look at the feasibility aspect, that's something that's been questioned. So in terms of feasibility, the NTA is fully prepared, if at all, if it is asked to conduct the test for this year's admissions, if we talk about?
NTA is technically it is ready. NTA is capable of conducting such large-scale examinations across the country, and it's a good professional body. I have absolutely no doubt about the capability of NTA in conducting such an exam across the country.
Okay, so I'll come back to you and understand how the NTA plans to do that. But let me bring in Mr. Pai's views also into the program at the moment. Mr. Pai, what do you think of a common entrance test for college admissions? Will it be beneficial for students given the current scenario we are in?
Well, let me say this. I'm not very sure whether a common entrance test for everybody is a good idea. The numbers are very large. The number of young people going to college today every year could be maybe 35 lakhs, 40 lakhs. If you remove the professionals, it could be maybe 30 lakhs or 35 lakhs across the country. And the institutions they go to rank among the best in the world, best in India. They rank among the best in the state and in different institutions. So I don't see why everybody should be subject to the same common entrance test to go to an ordinary community college, which is there in the village or their town. Why are you imposing high costs and unnecessary burden on these people? What we should do is, we should classify in every single state all the undergraduate classes based upon the demand for those courses. Wherever we see a very, very high demand and you can have a cutoff, there should be a common test to go to those institutions. And I agree with Doc that for central universities is a good idea because central university gets students from all over the country. And they're a good idea. But it's not necessary for state colleges or community colleges, ordinary colleges. I think it's too much of a burden. I don't think we should do it. We should do it only for certain things. For example, in Delhi University, in the Sriram College, unless you get 100%, you don't get in, which is a travesty of everything education stands for. So I think it's important to classify these institutions and to say, for certain institutions where there's huge demand, we will have a common entrance test because it will create uniformity and give opportunities. But you must not ignore the class 12 results, because then what will happen? Students will stop studying for the class 12 results. So what we can say is the top 20% in every board, top 20% in every board, because in CBSE, there has been a lowering of standards with a lot of people getting 100%. And thing is, I don't agree with that 100%. I'm sure Doc and I, we topped our classes, but we didn't get 100%. They were tough classes, right? Now everybody seems to get 100%. So what we should do is the top 20% of young people in CBSE, top 20% ICSEs, top 20% state boards have the same level of competence and intelligence because they're in the top 20%. In the state board, the top 20 could be from 60 to 80, whereas CBSE, it could be maybe 80 to 100, right? So we can say for all these institutions, you have to be in the top 20% and you could have cutoff marks everywhere. The data is available based upon some kind of mechanism and they can sit for the entrance exam and this will be the CET and this will be the means to get into so many institutions and you can define the institutions and restrict it to that and also say very clearly, if you have the CET, we're going to give you 2 opportunities or 3 opportunities. It's very wrong to judge a person on one test. Like Doc said, the teacher may be indifferent, teacher may be in a bad mood. Similarly, if you have one test for a CET and your entire future depends on that, you could be sick, you could not be well, you could be in a bad mood, give 2 chances. And that's very reasonable because it's not a lottery. And the highest of the 2 chances, give it to the student. So there is an amount of flexibility. And for ordinary colleges, I don't think you should burden all the young people in this country. Because if you go to a Musposil town, there are 5 colleges. People easily get into that. Why put them to a CET? People get into those institutions very easily. And they don't want to bear the cost. They don't want to go to, JNU or the central institution. They don't want to go to Sriram College. They want to go to an ordinary college next door just to get an ordinary degree. Give them the opportunity. Don't impose everything. We've got to think through this very carefully because we are not a homogeneous country. We are a very heterogeneous country. The standards are very different everywhere. We have multiple languages. But the idea of a CET to get into central institution is a good idea. I think I support that. The idea of a CET to get into the top 10% institutions where there's great demand is a good idea. But it must not be everywhere.
So
And we must
Professor, let me
class
bring that
12
question
into
to you,
account.
because what you suggested, obviously a common entrance test will end the disparities at numerous levels in the manner in which the students are evaluated if it is purely based on the mark system. But Mr. Pai is right that subjecting students to a common entrance test, even if they're seeking admission to an ordinary college, isn't a fair idea. So has there been a consideration that maybe equal weightage can be given to both? Maybe both can be taken into consideration, and that perhaps could be a more equitable way to deal with the admission process?
So let me refer to what Dr. Mohan Pai has said,
Yes.
that it should not be imposed that everybody has to mandatorily use this common entrance examination. If you look at the NEP document, it is very clearly mentioned there that it will be left up to the individual universities and colleges to use NTA assessments for their admissions. Please remember that the universities and colleges, they are autonomous entities. They decide what is their admission policy. So the NTA will conduct the national level common entrance examination, maybe once, twice, or even thrice, so that students have opportunity to improve. But it is up to the university or college to design the admission process. Now, let me give you an example. Now, some of the universities may solely base their admission only on this common entrance examination, but other universities may come up with a different way of admission, maybe 70% weightage for the entrance examination marks, and the remaining 30% marks weightage for the 12th standard, so that students do not neglect their studies in their 10th standard and 12th standards. And this is a very common practice. If you look at the admissions into Indian Institute of Management, for example, in Indian Institute of Management, they have what is known as the academic rating score. So if you are coming from science stream, if you are getting marks somewhere between 60 and 70, the score is 3. But if you are coming from arts and humanities, even if you get a score between 50 and 60, not necessarily 60 and 70, you will get the same academic score. So you need to normalize these kind of scores, and then use these academic scores, which are a reflection of the performance of the student in their 12th standard, and also make use of the entrance examination. So it is left to the universities completely to design their admission process, but having a common examination, at least for the national level institutes, institutes of national importance and central universities, it will bring some kind of parity and better opportunity for students across the country to get admission in these institutes.
Okay, Mr. Pai, every year when the cutoff lists of prominent universities, which are in fact the dream universities of students across India, when the cutoff lists are released, there's a whole lot of debate around how we need to end the tyranny of the cutoff marks, which are based on the class 12 board exams for college admissions. So now if we go for a common entrance test, at least for these colleges, don't you think that tyranny of the cutoff marks, which is solely based on class 12 marks, it helps us to end that and move to a better system, which is based on evaluation?
No, I agree with I agree with Doc that you can do it for institutes of national importance and central universities in the first place, and every university can design, because that gives the necessary flexibility, and I think that's very, very important. And I agree with him totally on that, because we need to have a very flexible system for the entire country, because large numbers come out. You must be aware, as per the iShare report, nearly 90 lakh students graduate every year. All right, so we got to be very careful about all this kind of thing. I agree with him totally, and I also agree with him that you must give some weightage to class 11 and 12, because children should not ignore their 11 and 12, which is very fundamental to them, and go to a coaching mandi and say we are going to have this test, etc. And to give 2 or 3 opportunities is very, very welcome, because let students get equal opportunity. It doesn't matter. We've got to make it available to them. The IIT system is very good, but there's one fundamental point which I want to place before Doc, because he's and you in this channel. You see, we must expand the capacity in good institutions. You can't have a Sriram College with 100 students in a class. That's ridiculous. 100 students in the class for the last 25 years. Now, IIT should each expand. I would like, and I was part of the Kakorkar committee which went into IITs. I think Doc knows about that. And we said the IITs, the central IIT system, the NIT system, the triple IT system, and the ICIR, some system, Indian Institute of Science and Technology, all of them between them should every year get 100,000 young people into the colleges. I think there are about 60 or 70,000, 60 or 70 institutions. So expand the capacity, more people come. Because of 1.38 billion people, it is very difficult to believe that there are only about 30,000 people who can go to an IIT. I mean, the UK with only 65 million people has 100 universities. There maybe 25 are very good. Why are we squeezing supply just because we want these institutions to be very good? An institution doesn't become world class just because the top 0.001% students go there. Then we don't need teachers at all. So we have to expand it. And there's got to be representation for women. Women representation, IITs in the central is quite low in the technical subjects. We got to give weightage to women. And then, of course, the reservation system today, 50% is very good. Even though some people complain, I agree, because education is a means of enhancing the capacity of people. It is not a means of shutting out people. So expand the capacity too. So the top 10% universities have a large enough capacity where the top 10% universities take in 10-15% of people. For example, the classes in the IIMs, why can't each batch be 800 students? Harvard has 800 students. They don't have a problem. Why should it be 200, 300? Remember, the IIMs used to have 100. Now they got 400, 550. Then they say there's no faculty, etc. You got to go high faculty. You know, in the Kakur committee, we recommended the total number of PhDs in IIT should be 10,000 a year. We have to improve PhDs because India has only 220,000 PhDs for a country of this size. And most of them are in the art subject. We got to expand the PhD program for the science subject because these could be the teachers, these could be the high quality researchers. Because most of the young people to do masters in IIT go overseas. Why can't they do masters in our own institution? So I think the NEP has all this in bits and pieces. I'm sure people like Doc will look at all this and expand the scope of opportunities so more young people get opportunities to go to very good institutions.
Absolutely agree, because that's the point of larger debate, Mr. Pai, that our education system needs to be more and more inclusive. But coming back to what we are discussing on the common entrance test, Professor Kumar, if I may ask you, what will the entrance test assess in terms of what were the recommendations that the R.P. Tiwari committee had made? And in the current scenario, how will it be held? Will it be offline? Will it be online? What are the kind of preparations that we have to undergo if we are looking at the current session, because we only have then 2.5 to 3 months?
You see, this is basically going to be a computer-based test. Mm-hmm. So, and it will test both the aptitude of the student and also the subject-specific knowledge. So, for example, this computer-based test may examine the capability of the student in terms of verbal, quantitative, and logic and reasoning. And then the students will also be tested in their subject knowledge. Okay. Now, the advantage of doing this kind of testing is that it is error-free. And you can actually get normative data on the capability of the students. For example, how many students are answering a particular question? How many students are not able to answer a particular question, so that you can redesign the questions that you are putting to the students. And then now you have artificial intelligence-based algorithms working in the background. And these algorithms can actually detect how the student is answering these questions and then pop up. Change the difficulty level of the questions. So there are a lot of advantages of a computer-based test. But going back to what Dr. Mohan Pai has said, you see, if you look at the numbers, take, for example, this simple parameter, eligibility enrollment ratio in the age group of 18 to 23. That is about 66% in US, in the most advanced country. And in India, we are not far behind. For us also, it is about 65 to 60%. This is different from the GER, gross enrollment ratio. Now, 66% in US translates to about 2.1 million students. In India, the same eligibility enrollment ratio of 66% translates to something like 28 million. So the scale at which we are handling our students is really too big. So therefore, I completely agree with Dr. Pai that we must increase the number of students that we are taking into our top institutes. If you look at some of the best institutes in the world, whether it is even in Asia, such as China and Japan, or in Europe and US, their student strength in a given university is anywhere from 40 to 60,000. Whereas, in a university like JNU, where the admission is so competitive, we have close to about only 9,000 students. We admit only yearly about 2,500 to 3,000 students. I think we must increase the capacity of our institutes. Otherwise, how will you meet the aspirations of so many students? Our educational system, right from first class, has close to about 300 million students. And out of that, nearly only 10% of them are able to study in the higher educational institutes. But at the same time, we also have to be very careful. No, we should not train everybody to become a doctor and engineer. We must understand that there are various other professions which are also important for the economic growth of our country. For example, vocational education and providing other skills. Please remember, not everybody would like to become a doctorate. Many people would like to acquire certain skills and then get on with their job so that they can support their families. So we have a very, very diverse situation in our country, and we need to meet and fulfill the aspirations of every cross section of our student community.
But what about those who are at a disadvantage? The pandemic has, of course, had a huge impact on the education, particularly those who have not had a consistent access to high-speed internet, maybe gadgets as well. So does this new system of a computer-based test leave them further at a disadvantage?
See, my personal view is COVID has damaged the ability of students to write an exam and hurt them educationally. We have to accept that. But there is no solution right now to take care of everybody and to equalize opportunities. So we got to make the best case, and what Doc said about the best case of having this test, university having this thing, etc., we should do. And we should be generous to allow them 2 or 3 chances so that they feel they have attempted, they get it or not, so they feel that we have been fair to them. And also allow next year and the year after that, people who completed 12th standard 1 year back or 2 years back to come and try. Let them try, give them the opportunity, because we know that these 2 years they've been damaged, many have been hurt, and many of the poor kids in government schools and in rural areas didn't have the ability of high-speed internet, or they were too poor. They're too poor. And that's why in the new education policy, we must make sure that digital capacity and devices is available to all children in government schools. That is a national imperative. It is demonstrated to us that we cannot have competition in an unequal society. We must give the same tools to the largest number of people, and we can afford it. It's not too expensive. It's inexpensive. But we need a political decision. We need people like Doc to recommend to government. We have to do this so that everybody gets a reasonably equal, not exactly equal opportunities. Students in rural areas don't suffer. And the people who suffered now get maybe another 2 years to make up, and that's all we can do as a society. We can't do much more.
But I would like to clarify.
But going forward, Professor, yes.
I would like to clarify one point here. Many people get confused when we talk about the computer-based examination, computer-based test with the availability of the internet. See, the availability of the internet is required when we are teaching the students through online digital platforms. And that is where the students require both the internet access and also a device to access this digital content. And as far as the internet access is concerned, I'm sure there is a fiber optic network that is being laid out across the country, reaching up to the panchayat level, block level. And in the coming years, I'm sure the internet connection will improve. But as far as the devices are concerned, there is still a greater need for entrepreneurs and innovators within our country to come up with designs and manufacture these devices at a lower cost, so that even a child who is going to a school in a village should be able to buy this device from a local kirana store. We need to reach that stage. And the other part is, when we are conducting the computer-based test, it is nothing to do with the internet. In fact, this test is conducted on using computers in a college, for example, in an engineering college where there is a computer lab. The internet is cut off from the college, and the computers are connected to a local server using a local area network, and the communication takes place only between those computers and the server which is connected there. So you don't require any internet access. And in fact, now we have thousands of colleges, engineering colleges spread across the country, and there are so many computer labs available. And you can provide better access to the students in terms of this computer-based test. So therefore, let's not confuse between the availability of the internet and the computer-based tests.
No, I think the larger point that I and Mr. Pai wanted to make was not just in terms of the computer-based test, but also I think in the manner in which education has shifted online, and a lot of students have had to suffer because of the pandemic, because they've not been able to have access to good education because of lack of gadgets or lack of internet. I think that was the larger debate. But coming to you, Mr. Pai, for one point. Sure.
Yeah, one point. You see, I want to make one point to Dr. Kumar, and that is, urban kids know how to do this test. They're very familiar with the test. And for any rural kid, doing the test for the first time is intimidating. I'm sure every parent will ask their children to do the test multiple times on some proxy servers and go through the entire process to make them understand how to do the test. It's not easy for people who are not being exposed to do the test. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make, that access will make sure that people are trained how to do the test, because you have a limited time. And if you have a difficult question, you should have the capacity to say, I will not do the question, go elsewhere, finish everything, come back. There is a metrics, there's a methodology of doing that.
Certainly. I think going forward, there are going to be some practical hurdles, but I believe the NTA has been doing it effectively and will be able to handle this also efficiently. But Professor, one final question from you, because given the fact that we're still amid this second wave of pandemic, and this test will be conducted obviously at a college or at a center. But so going forward, what kind of planning will be required that balances both the health and also the academic future of the children without leaving anyone at a disadvantage? Also looking at the fact that the students form one group of the population which have not been vaccinated yet as well.
So two parts here. When you conduct the computer-based test, it is still a physical exam, meaning that the students have to reach out to a physical center.
Yes.
So therefore, only when the COVID situation permits, when it is safe to the students to the fullest possible extent, then only we will conduct this examination. So it may happen in July, it may happen in August. Let's wait and see and observe the COVID, how the COVID pandemic is spreading out. But what Dr. Pai has said is, many kids from the rural areas are not familiar with the computer-based test. Therefore, they may be intimidated. I agree with that. But however, the computer-based tests, they do not require the use of any keyboards, for example. It only requires the use of a mouse, and you just do the calculations on a piece of paper, and then using a mouse, you enter your response. So it is as simple as that. But even to overcome any kind of the fear the students may have, the NTA also arranges practice sessions. The students can practice it beforehand, well before the exam is conducted, so that if they have any fear, that fear is taken off.
Absolutely. It's very important that for an exam that will decide the future of lakhs of students across the country, we should have proper planning, a calibrated move, which takes into account both their health and also their academic future. So with that, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you once again to both my panelists for joining me on the program and putting forth your perspective on this very, very important subject. Pleasure having you on the show. So that's it from us on this edition of The Big Picture. Thanks very much for your time.